we all have ways of dealing with stress, right? But have you ever wondered about the unconscious protectors working inside your mind? Well, in this explainer, we're going to break down the fascinating science behind these mental shields, our psychological defense mechanisms. And we're doing it based on a fantastic new paper that connects a century of psychological theory with today's clinical science. So, our guide for this journey is a paper by Vittorio Lingiardi and Fabio Mededdu. What they've done is take one of psychology's most foundational concepts and show exactly why it's still such a vital tool for understanding the mind today. Okay, here's our game plan. First, we'll cover the basics of what these psychological shields are. Then, we'll trace their journey from a neat theory to hard science. After that, we'll get into the different types of defenses, see how all this is used in therapy, and finally, we'll take a peek at what the future holds for this field. So, let's dive right in with the big question. What exactly are these psychological shields, and what are they even for? Think about it for a second. When you're faced with some kind of emotional pain or a really tough internal conflict, your mind doesn't just stand there and take the hit. It has an automatic, totally built-in system to protect you. And that system is made up of what we call defense mechanisms. Honestly, the best way to think about them is like a psychological immune system. They're these mostly unconscious processes that our ego, the rational decision-making part of us, uses to shield us from anxiety and all that inner turmoil. Now, how this idea evolved is a pretty cool story. It's a fascinating journey that took this concept all the way from Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic couch to the modern, high-tech scientific laboratory. It all kicked off with Freud way back in 1894, but for decades it was pretty much just a theory. Then, in the 1970s, a researcher named George Valiant did some groundbreaking work. He actually proved with data that there's a real link between the kinds of defenses people use and their long-term health. But the absolute game changer came in 1990 when J. Christopher Perry developed a tool called the DMRS. This finally allowed scientists to reliably measure and study these concepts that were once so elusive. And here is the single most important point. Not all of these mental shields are the same, not even close. Modern research has shown they exist on a spectrum, or a kind of hierarchy, from really healthy and adaptive to, well, pretty unhealthy and maladaptive. So, on the healthy end, what we call mature defenses, you've got things like humor, altruism, and sublimation. Sublimation is a classic example. It's when you channel a tough emotion into something constructive, like turning your frustration into a killer workout. On the flip side, you have immature defenses like denial, projection, and splitting. These tend to distort reality, like seeing everything in black and white, and often just cause more problems down the line. This quote from George Valiant really just nails it. His research was so pivotal because it gave us hard data showing that people who consistently use more of these mature defenses, well, they generally lead healthier, more well-adjusted lives. This isn't just a theory anymore. It's backed up by decades of solid evidence. And this is exactly why understanding our defenses is so critical, especially in a therapy setting. It literally gives therapists a roadmap to understanding a person's inner world. The goal is to get what's called transdiagnostic insight. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the idea is simple. Instead of just looking at a checklist of symptoms for, say, depression, a therapist can look at a person's defensive style. This shows them how that person manages their emotions and relationships on a much deeper level. It gives them a way richer picture of the whole person. So, a key goal in many types of therapy is something called defensive reorganization. First, the therapist helps you spot your rigid, automatic defensive patterns. Then, you work together to really become aware of the impact these defenses are having on your life. And the final step is to gradually build up more mature, flexible defenses that are a better fit for reality. And the research is clear. This stuff works. Assessing defenses can actually help predict how well therapy might go. It informs how the therapist approaches treatment, and it can even help clarify a diagnosis. In fact, the paper argues that this shift towards more mature defenses might be a common thread that explains why so many different kinds of therapy are effective. So, where does this fascinating field go from here? Well, the research is branching out in some incredibly exciting new directions. Okay, one of the biggest new frontiers is the link to neuroscience. Researchers are now asking, can we actually see these defenses at work in the brain? The ultimate goal is to map these psychological processes to specific neural circuits, bridging that gap between psychodynamic theory and modern neuroscience. How cool is that? Another really crucial question is the role of culture. While the basic defensive hierarchy seems to be pretty consistent across Western cultures, we need a lot more research on how different cultural contexts might shape how defenses are expressed. I mean, what's considered an adaptive way to cope in one culture might be seen very differently in another. And that brings us to our final thought, a really powerful quote from the paper we've been exploring. It perfectly captures the main idea here. Our unconscious ways of coping are just as important as our conscious thoughts and feelings. Understanding our psychological shields isn't just some academic exercise, it's absolutely fundamental to understanding ourselves.